She held the rifle wrong. Stock too low. Barrel tilted 9 degrees off center. The recruits laughed. The veterans shook their heads. Even the sergeant told her to move to the back of the line. Then she fired. First shot high right. Louder laughter. Second low left. They called it amateur hour. Third shot dead center. Fourth, fifth, sixth same hole. The range went silent. The instructor's face drained of color. He leaned forward and whispered the only phrase anyone remembered that day. Only serpents train like that. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from, and if you believe honor and courage still matter, help keep their legacy alive. The wind screamed across Red Mesa, dragging sand through the valley like invisible claws. The air shimmered with heat, and every breath tasted of iron and dust. Along the firing line, recruits lay prone uniform, polished, precise. All except one, Avery Stone, civilian trainee. Late 30s, no rank, no insignia, and no explanation for the way she carried herself. Her rifle rested low, barrel tilted 9 degrees off center, the stock pressed lower than any regulation manual allowed. Is she serious? A recruit muttered. That's not marksmanship. That's yoga. Laughter rippled through the group. Someone imitated her stance, arms flailing like a bad movie soldier. She didn't flinch. She adjusted her breathing instead, slow and deliberate, syncing with the pulse of the desert wind. The laughter rose again, but her eyes stayed on the target unblinking, calm, unreadable. From the observation tower, Lieutenant Colonel Grant Ellison lowered his binoculars. He'd seen that posture once before years ago, in a place where every shot decided who lived to see the next sunrise. Something about her movements triggered an unease he couldn't explain. Master Sergeant Colin Draper stalked the line, boots thudding against the dry ground. Form matters, he barked. You want consistency. You follow protocol. Not whatever this is. He stopped behind Avery. Civilian or not, you shoot on my range. You shoot by the book. Yes, Sergeant, she said softly, eyes never leaving the sight. Her finger slid over the trigger. A gust of wind blew grit into her hair. But she didn't blink. Then crack. The first round echoed through the valley, slamming high right on the steel plate. Miss! The laughter came fast. Told you can't even hit paper. Another recruit laughed so hard he slapped the dirt. Avery adjusted nothing. Just breathed again. Her left hand shifted 1 millimeter. The kind of micro-movement no one noticed except the man behind the scope in the tower. Crack. Second round. Low left this time. Another miss. Ellison leaned forward, eyes narrowing. 2 opposite corners, perfect symmetry. She wasn't missing. She was drawing a line. She's calibrating, he murmured. Avery exhaled. Third round. Crack. The target rang dead center. The laughter died like a switch had been thrown. Her fourth shot followed instantly ping. Fifth ping again. Sixth another hit, almost on top of the last. Within seconds, the bullseye looked melted. The desert went silent. The recruits stared, mouths open, the heat haze rippling around them like disbelief made visible. Draper's jaw tightened. That's enough, he said sharply. Whatever stunt that was, it's over. Back of the line. Avery cleared her weapon, calm and silent. No protest. She just stood, brushing sand from her sleeve, and stepped aside. As she walked away, Ellison climbed down from the tower. The others went back to work, but he kept watching the steel target. He walked closer, boots crunching over shell casings. 6 perfect holes formed a diagonal pattern, each one tracing the arc of the wind. He touched the steel. The edges still warm. Not luck. Not random. Calculation. He turned toward the benches where she was packing her gear. Sunlight flashed off the rifle's trigger guard, revealing a faint engraving beneath the scratches. A coiled serpent biting its own tail. His pulse tightened. That mark wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Lieutenant Colonel Draper called out from behind. You see something? Ellison didn't answer. The wind drowned his thoughts. He looked once more at the emblem, then at the woman walking toward the far dunes. A dust devil rose between them, swirling like smoke. When it passed, she was already fading into the glare, a shadow swallowed by the desert. "Down the line," one recruit whispered. "Who even is she?" No one replied. Ellison exhaled through his nose and muttered under his breath, barely louder than the wind. "Only serpents train like that." The words vanished into the heat, carried away by the desert air. The targets clanged softly in the distance, the sound steady, rhythmic like breathing, and for the first time all day. Red Mesa was silent. The second day began with a warning. Wind sliced through Red Mesa like an invisible blade, whipping grit into the recruits' eyes. Flags along the range stood stiff, snapping in the gusts. Master Sergeant Draper shouted over the noise, clipboard in hand. 920 meters. Crosswind, 24 knots. Voluntary demonstration. His tone made the word voluntary sound like suicide. No one moved. Boots scraped nervously on the gravel. Then Avery Stone stepped forward, rifle already slung over her shoulder. The recruits exchanged quick glances, a mix of disbelief and relief she'd just saved them from the humiliation. Draper frowned. "Ma'am, this isn't smart. That wind will eat your bullet alive." Avery's voice was calm. "Then I'll aim where it eats." Ellison watched from the observation tower, arms folded, wind tugging at his cap. He knew the look in her eyes, that slow narrowing just before a marksman separates from the rest of the world. She lay prone, adjusted her position, and pressed her cheek to the stock. The desert roared, but she moved like she couldn't hear it. The first shot cracked through the air, disappearing into the wind's scream. A second later, the steel silhouette rang high. 12 o'clock. Murmurs rippled through the firing line. Draper squinted at the target. Fluke. Second shot. Another ping. Same spot. She hadn't touched the turrets, hadn't shifted an inch. Third shot. Dead center. The impact ripped a clean hole through the middle of the plate. The range went silent except for the wind. "She just walked the wind," Ellison muttered, eyes glued to the spotting scope. Before Draper could reply, a mechanical groan rolled across the desert. Everyone turned toward the pulley system moving the targets. One cable had snagged, twisting violently in the wind. A range technician jogged out to fix it, crouching near the base. The pulley jerked again. A bolt rattled loose. Ellison lifted his binoculars. The shear pin above the bracket vibrated like a live wire. "That pin's about to snap," he shouted. Cole grabbed her radio, yelling for a full stop. But the gusts drowned her voice. The motor kept pulling, dragging the steel frame toward the tech. Avery was already moving. "I can stop it." Draper turned sharply. "Stand down, you're not authorized 1 round, she said, sliding a fresh magazine in. "It locks the axle. Procedure says Ellison cut him off. Clear the line." The recruits scrambled back behind the barricade. The technician looked up, confused, as Avery dropped to her belly and set her sights on the tiny moving target. 340 meters. Crosswind howling. Pin vibrating like a heartbeat. Avery inhaled. The sound around her faded until only the trigger's click existed. The rifle thundered. A spark burst from the pulley. The pin exploded into dust. The entire rig froze mid-motion. The technician fell backward, staring in disbelief. A second later, the safety alarm blared. The crisis was over. For a heartbeat. No one spoke. Then a single voice murmured, "She just hit a shear pin." Another added, "At 300 meters. Applause started hesitantly, 1 clap. Then 2. But Avery didn't look up. She cycled the bolt, cleared the chamber, and rose to her knees. Her breathing stayed steady, as if the shot had been nothing. Draper walked over, jaw tight. "Lucky shot." Ellison stepped between them. Luck doesn't calculate drift and drop. Avery looked at the frozen pulley, then back at Draper. "We shoot to stop damage. Sergeant, not to cause it." Her words carried no pride. No defiance, just truth. Draper didn't reply. He turned away, staring at the immobilized pulley like it had insulted him personally. Ellison knelt by the mechanism, running his fingers along the hole. Perfect center. No torn metal. The kind of control you couldn't fake. He looked up as she slung her rifle and walked away. The wind whipped her hair, dust curling around her like smoke. The recruits whispered among themselves, voices trembling. Nobody shoots like that. Not unless... Ellison's mind filled in the rest. Not unless they were trained for it. He watched her silhouette fade against the burning horizon, the sound of her single shot still echoing off the red cliffs. No hero's music, no applause, just the endless desert wind and a feeling that something long buried had just surfaced again. Night fell heavy over Red Mesa. The desert wind had finally quieted, but the silence felt unnatural, as if the air itself was waiting. Inside the dim operations trailer, Lieutenant Colonel Grant Ellison sat alone under a red lamp, replaying Avery Stone's footage for the 10th time. He slowed the frame, each round identical recoil, zero wasted movement, breath synced to the wind. No civilian moved like that. He opened an old field notebook, its corners frayed from sand and sweat. On one page, a faded diagram, 3 bullet holes forming the exact pattern she'd just fired that afternoon. The date read, Kandahar Ridge, 2012. Ellison whispered to the empty room. No way she's still alive. Outside. Under a half moon. Avery cleaned her rifle in silence. Every motion was careful. Almost ceremonial. The soft click of metal echoed through the night. For a moment, she stopped, listening to the wind's rhythm, the way others might listen for a heartbeat. Ellison approached, the gravel crunching under his boots. You always clean after hours. Avery didn't look up. Habit. Old ones are hard to kill. He crouched beside her, eyes on the rifle. You ever serve? She reassembled the bolt, sliding it home with mechanical precision. I did work that doesn't count as serving. Ellison's voice dropped. That stance of yours off axis, counterdrift. The timing on that shot today. That's night serpent technique. Her hands froze for half a second before she resumed cleaning. Never heard of it. He studied her face under the pale light, calm, detached, but her pulse beat visibly in her neck. That program was buried. All operators listed KIA. You shouldn't exist. She met his eyes. Then maybe I don't. Before he could press further. Headlights cut through the dark. 3 black SUVs rolled up the dusty access road, engines low and synchronized. No military plates. No unit insignia. Draper stumbled from his bunkhouse, half awake. Who the hell's rolling in at midnight? The lead vehicle stopped beside the trailer. A woman stepped out, dark suit, calm posture, badge with no emblem. Director Helen Redding, Strategic Development Command. Her voice was firm but measured. We're here for the civilian trainee. Ellison crossed his arms. She's done nothing wrong. Redding's gaze didn't waver. She's using techniques that don't exist in current doctrine. And that symbol on her rifle, she paused, was last seen on a classified field manual 20 years ago. Avery stood slowly, weapon slung, face unreadable. If you wanted to talk. Director, you could have asked. We don't ask about serpent training, Redding replied. We confirm. Ellison stepped between them. You're not taking her anywhere. Redding shook her head. We're not here to arrest her. The opposite. The government is reopening the program under new parameters. We need her to codify what she knows formally, quietly. Avery's expression didn't change. And if I refuse, then your name returns to the casualty list. And this conversation never happened. The air thickened. Even the desert seemed to stop breathing. Ellison's tone hardened. You're asking her to vanish again? Redding looked straight at Avery. She already has. Avery finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. I'll help, but not for you, and not for credit. She glanced toward the dark horizon where the training targets still swayed in the night wind. It's for the next one who picks up a rifle and thinks precision needs permission. Redding nodded once. Understood. No salute. No handshake. Just an unspoken agreement between ghosts. As the SUVs prepared to leave, Ellison caught her reflection in the tinted glass, calm, eyes forward, already part of another world. You don't owe them anything, he said quietly. She gave the faintest hint of a smile. I'm not doing it for them. The convoy rolled out, engines fading into the canyon. When dawn came, her bunk was empty. On the pillow lay a single folded note, scrawled in neat handwriting, wind, time, purpose. Ellison held the note for a long moment before folding it carefully into his notebook beside the Kandahar page. He whispered to the morning light, "Some ghosts don't disappear. They just train the living. Outside." The wind picked up again, rustling through the empty lanes, soft, rhythmic, like someone breathing behind the scope. 3 days later, the sun rose cold and pale over Red Mesa. The wind had calmed, but the silence felt heavier than before. In the center of the range stood a table draped in black cloth, one broken shear pin resting in a small glass tray. No banners, no ranks, just quiet. Recruits lined up in full formation, caps tucked under their arms. Their faces were still young, but no longer careless. The range that once echoed with laughter now felt like a chapel made of sand and wind. Master Sergeant Draper stepped forward first. His voice carried, low and rough. 15 years of teaching. Thought I knew what precision looked like. He placed a single spent casing beside the pin. Turns out I was still guessing. He stepped back into line. Private Aaron Pike followed, his steps uneven. He set his marksmanship badge on the table. I judged her before she fired a single shot, he said quietly. I want to earn this again the right way. No applause followed, only the whisper of wind moving through the empty lanes. Lieutenant Colonel Ellison watched from the edge of the group. You'll hear stories, he said. Rumors, maybe even legends. Forget them. Remember the discipline. Remember that excellence doesn't shout. His gaze lingered on the steel silhouettes glinting under the morning sun. When the formation dismissed, the recruits didn't speak. Some lingered to touch the table, to feel the weight of silence she left behind. Weeks passed. Red Mesa changed. A new sign appeared over the training hangar wind and rhythm program. The phrase underneath was short and simple. Calibrate. Commit. Come home. Inside. Specialist Naomi Kerr faced a row of new students. She held her rifle low. Same off-angle stance Avery once used. Don't fight the wind, she said. Read it. Work with it. A hand went up. Who taught you that technique? Kerr smiled faintly. Someone who learned it the hard way. Outside the classroom, Ellison stood in the shade. Arms crossed. He didn't interrupt. He simply listened the rhythm of breathing, the sound of bolts locking, the quiet control. Every movement reminded him of her. That evening, he walked alone across the range. The desert was cooling fast, the horizon fading into blue shadow. He stopped at the exact spot where Avery had taken her no-fail shot. The ground still carried faint brass impressions half buried in sand. He knelt, brushing his hand over the dirt. The air was so still he could hear his own heartbeat. Then footsteps. Permission to join you. Sir. The voice was female. Steady. He turned to see a new instructor walking toward him. Staff Sergeant Tessa Morgan, recently transferred, if the paperwork was to be believed. Of course, he said. She carried her rifle casually, eyes scanning the terrain. They say a civilian once saved a tech here with one shot. They're not wrong. She smiled slightly. I wanted to see where it happened. Ellison studied her as she moved closer to the firing line. Without a word, she dropped to one knee, adjusted her position, and took aim. The stance was identical off-axis, shoulders relaxed, breathing in sync with the wind. She fired once. The round struck the steel. Dead center. She fired again. The second hit the same hole, expanding it just a fraction. When she rose, sunlight caught the inside of her wrist, a faint scar looping like a serpent's curve. Ellison's eyes narrowed. That's an interesting scar. She reloaded calmly. Occupational hazard. He didn't push further. He just nodded. They stood there for a long moment, the horizon glowing orange, the sound of cooling metal filling the silence. You think legends ever really end? She asked quietly. Ellison looked out at the targets. No. They just find new uniforms. Morgan slung her rifle and started back toward the compound. Then I guess class starts early tomorrow. When she disappeared into the fading light, Ellison turned toward the entrance. The memorial table had been moved there, right by the gate. A new plaque shone beneath the glass case. It read, "Excellence requires no audience." He stood still, letting the wind pass over him, carrying grains of sand and the distant echo of memory. Then, faintly, from somewhere far beyond the hills, came a single rifle shot, one precise crack swallowed by distance. Ellison smiled. Still calibrating, he whispered. The desert answered with silence, and the range breathed again, alive with rhythm, patience, and the unseen hands that kept its legend alive. If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear another story that's just as powerful and captivating, with courage, sacrifice, and a choice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about duty and justice.